Good morning, everyone. Hello, thank you for connecting with us this morning. This is Ayasoma speaking, and Bhante Sudazo is here. His Sutta study at 8 a.m. This will be happening every morning at 8 a.m., except for tomorrow. There will still be something at 8 a.m., but it won't be Sutta study. It will be part of our first day-long retreat, intensive Vipassana. So I believe there is a link on the live chat with the text of the Sutta that we will be studying this morning. And all right, I think we can start and I'll pass it on to Bhante.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Okay, good morning, friends. Today we'll be looking at another discourse from the Buddha. So this one is Majjhima Nikaya number 16, the Cetokhila Sutta. Which is translated here as mental desolation, or also I've seen this translated as mental barrenness. So ceto means mind, so it's related to the word chitta, and the word khila means, literally it means wasteland, like a desert or a place which is barren and lifeless. So the word Cetokhila here then means a barren mind, a mind that's like a wasteland, a mind that's lifeless and unproductive and useless. So that's translated here as mental desolation. And the sutta has a happy ending, by the way, just so that we get that out of the way right from the start. It might sound depressing now, but it actually turns out happy. So as usual, I'll go ahead and read through the sutta, and as I read through it, I'll give some explanations. And at any time, you're welcome to type your questions into the live chat, and I'll answer the questions at the end. So, starting at the beginning, thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was living at Savatthi in Jeta's Grove at Anathapindika's park. There, the Blessed One addressed the monks. Monks, auspicious sir, those monks replied to the Blessed One. The Blessed One said this: monks, when there is a monk for whom 5 kinds of mental desolation have not been abandoned, and 5 kinds of mental imprisonment have not been destroyed, it is not possible for him to attain growth, development, and fulfillment in this Dhamma Vinaya. So this is introducing what the Buddha is going to talk about for the first part of this discourse. So 5 kinds of mental desolation, so 5 ways that we make our mind like a wasteland, so like a barren, useless desert. And 5 kinds of mental imprisonment, so 5 kinds of ways that we trap our mind. And the Buddha says that as long as we have these 5 kinds of mental desolation and these 5 kinds of mental imprisonment, then it's not possible for us to make progress in Buddhist practice. So Dhamma Vinaya here is the phrase that the Buddha most commonly used to refer to Buddhism, to Buddhist practice. So Dhamma is the teachings, or the way things are, and Vinaya means trainings, disciplines, practices for training and disciplining ourselves, for developing self-restraint, self-control. So Dhamma Vinaya together is sometimes translated as things like the teachings and the trainings, or the doctrine and the discipline, or things of that sort. Here it was left untranslated, simply as Dhamma Vinaya. So then the Buddha launches into this. He says, what are the 5 kinds of mental desolation that have not been abandoned by him? Here, a monk is uncertain and doubtful about the teacher. So in the suttas, the word teacher, satta, almost always refers to the Buddha. When it's referring in a more ordinary sense, like to a monk who is your teacher, for example, then the word that's used is acharya. So when the word satta is used, it's almost always talking about the Buddha in particular, not just about any particular teacher. So here, a monk is uncertain and doubtful about the teacher and has not resolved his mind and become confident in the teacher. Monks, when a monk is uncertain and doubtful about the teacher and has not resolved his mind and become confident in the teacher, his mind does not tend towards ardency, commitment, perseverance, and striving. As his mind does not tend towards ardency, commitment, perseverance, and striving, this is the first kind of mental desolation that has not been abandoned by him. So this first case here is the case of someone who is doubtful about the Buddha, who does not have confidence in the Buddha. So one of the basic things that helps give us a sense of commitment and resolution in our practice is the concept of a Buddha, concept of a fully awakened being. The concept that, first of all, it's possible to become a Buddha, it's possible to attain enlightenment. Not only is it possible, but there are people who have done it. Not only are there people who have done it, but they have shared the path with us. They taught us the path which we can also follow to get to the same awakening that they got to. So confidence in the Buddha then gives us a great deal of zeal for the path. It gives us a sense of the value and importance of the path. So without any concept of the Buddha, then these practices just become a bunch of hollow psychotherapy exercises that you might do in order to be 10% happier or something depressing like that. But Buddhism is not about being 10% happier. It's about attaining complete enlightenment. So the basis of that is recognizing the existence of enlightened beings and the possibility of following in their footsteps. This is also important because, again, it's the difference between some random guy telling you to do something versus a fully enlightened being with perfect wisdom and compassion recommending that you do something. So random guy might make really bad suggestions, but fully enlightened Buddha with perfect wisdom and compassion is only going to make good suggestions. And not just good suggestions, but magnificently sublime suggestions. So again, confidence in the Buddha is a basis for sincerity and commitment in our practice, for making not just a small amount of effort, but really striving, really putting forth a sincere, committed, genuine, ongoing application of mind into our practice. So this is very important. So it's not surprising that this is the very first item on the list, which is the case of someone who lacks faith in the Buddha. The second one he gives, so there is a monk who is uncertain and doubtful about the Dhamma. And he goes through the same as before. One who is uncertain and doubtful about the Sangha, and one who is uncertain and doubtful about the training. So for each one of these, he makes the same statement. When a monk is uncertain and doubtful about the Dhamma, the Sangha, and the training, and has not resolved his mind and become confident in them, his mind does not tend towards ardency, commitment, perseverance, and striving. As his mind does not tend towards ardency, commitment, perseverance, and striving, these are the, respectively, second, third, and fourth kind of mental desolation that have not been abandoned by him. So similarly, if one is doubtful about the Dhamma, So if one is not sure that the Dhamma is useful, not sure that it's true, not sure that it leads towards awakening, then one is not likely to put forth much effort in following it. It's kind of like if you're looking online for a recipe and you find a recipe that has 2.5 stars, and it's published on a website that has no good reputation, then you might not have much faith in following that particular recipe. On the other hand, if you find something from Italy that has 5 stars and it's on a reputable publication, then you might be like, oh, this recipe might be worth following. This one might get some good results. So similarly, if you don't have faith in the Dhamma, if you don't have confidence that the Dhamma is useful and valid, then why would you bother to follow it? Why would you put forth much effort in it? So of course, maybe in the very beginning, when you very first start looking at Buddhism, maybe then you don't have much faith in the Dhamma because you haven't examined it. But as we examine it, then we recognize its truth, we recognize its power, we recognize its usefulness, which means that then we're willing to make a sincere effort to learn it, to understand it, and to practice it. So uncertain and doubtful about the Sangha. And keep in mind that commonly in the suttas, when the Buddha is talking about the Sangha, he's not talking about the ordinary unenlightened delusional people that you normally encounter, but rather he's talking about the noble Sangha, the Arya Sangha. So those members of the Sangha who have practiced sincerely enough, with enough dedication, with enough commitment, that they've been able to attain some stage of awakening. They've been able to purify and develop their minds to a significant extent. So to lack faith in the Sangha means to lack faith that there are people who have followed in the Buddha's footsteps. It means to lack faith that there is value to the Sangha even. So Sangha, again, it has a few traditional definitions. So one is the monastic community. So all the bhikkhus and bhikkhunis and samanas and samaneris and so on who have taken on the trainings and practices of Buddhist monastic life. So that's one definition of Sangha. Another is the noble Sangha, the Arya Sangha, as I mentioned a moment ago. So those who have attained some degree of awakening. And also we talk about the fourfold Sangha, which is the collection of all Buddhist practitioners, whether female or male, whether monastic or lay. So all those who are practicing the Buddha's teachings. And there's tremendous value in the Sangha. There's tremendous value in spending time with monastics and spending time with fellow practitioners because it helps to give us support in our practice. It helps to remind us of what we're trying to do, and it helps to keep us pointed in the right direction. So as we were mentioning yesterday, the Buddha said that the basis of development in Buddhist practice is mutual admonishment, mutual support. So that's only possible if we have other people to be mutually supportive of, other people who we can practice together with, who we can study together with, who we can discuss the Dhamma together with. So seeing the value in the Sangha. Another really important aspect of the Sangha, by the way, is that it helps to keep us from getting caught into wrong view. Because if the Dhamma is just something that we do by ourselves in our own mind, then we can very easily get locked into a misunderstanding, into a false perspective, a distorted viewpoint. And we can become extremely convinced of our own viewpoints because we're delusional and we're really good at fooling ourselves. So being involved with other members of the Sangha gives us that opportunity for others to point out to us our delusions and our misunderstandings and to suggest that maybe there's another way. of looking at these things. Maybe there's another way of understanding the Dhamma or approaching the Dhamma, something which might be more closely in line with what the Buddha had in mind. And finally, he talks about one who is doubtful about the training, who lacks faith in the training. So the word here is sikha, which, again, it's commonly translated simply as training. Those who are used to chanting the 5 precepts or the 8 precepts or the 10 precepts or a lot more than 10 precepts in the case of monastics, those who are used to chanting their precepts might be familiar with the word sikkhapada. So that's from the same word sikha, which means training. So sikkhapada is the path of training. Or pada can mean path, but it can also mean foot or step, like a step of training or path of training. So being doubtful about the training means being doubtful about the precepts, being doubtful that there's value in the precepts. So a lot of people, when they encounter Buddhism, they're like, meditation practice. Yes, I like meditation. I like samadhi. Yes, I'm going to practice vipassana, and I will attain maybe even 15% happier by practicing samadhi and vipassana. Or maybe actually you get someone who thinks, I will attain enlightenment by practicing samadhi and vipassana. But then they look at the precepts and it's like, yeah, I don't need that. I don't need that. There's nothing wrong with telling a few lies. There's nothing wrong with cheating on my partner. They won't mind. They won't find out anyway. There's nothing wrong with getting drunk once in a while. It's all fine. It's all fine. But actually, no. The precepts are the foundation of our practice. If we can't follow at least the 5 precepts, then we have no hope of developing true wisdom. We have no hope of attaining enlightenment. So the 5 precepts are the foundation of our practice. They're the basic underpinnings which give us the solidity of developing a genuine, solid practice. So the training principles that we follow, the precepts that we make a commitment to, they help us avoid harmful activities, things which weaken our wisdom. They help us develop self-awareness and self-restraint. They help us cultivate a steady and peaceful mind, which is the basis of samadhi. They help us to overcome remorse and regret by giving us a wholesome way to look at ourselves. So instead of looking at ourselves as callous and immoral and unkind, instead we can look at ourselves as being good people, virtuous people, moral people, generous people, kind people. So the training practices that we follow them because they are an essential component of the path. So if we don't have any faith in the value of the precepts, then we won't put forth much effort in our practice and we won't get good results. No matter how much we meditate, if we don't follow the precepts, our meditation is not going to bring us much benefit. And then the 5th form of mental desolation, the Buddha says, monks, this is another one. There is a monk who is angry and dissatisfied with his co-practitioners, who has an afflicted mind and a callous nature. Some of us might know people like this. Monks, when a monk is angry and dissatisfied with his co-practitioners, when he has an afflicted mind and a callous nature, his mind does not tend towards ardency, commitment, perseverance, and striving. As his mind does not tend towards ardency, commitment, perseverance, and striving, this is the 5th kind of mental desolation that has not been abandoned by him. So this is, again, especially in monastic life, this is something which is really apparent. So when living together in a monastic community, if one of the monks is prone to getting angry a lot and has a lot of discontent and dissatisfaction and irritability towards the other monastics, and their mind is always overcome with callousness and harshness, a lack of consideration. That's a person who's very difficult to live with. But more importantly, they have a very difficult time in their practice. Because they're constantly giving in to anger, because they're inconsiderate and therefore lost in self-centeredness, then it's very difficult for them to practice sincerely. It's very difficult for them to develop samadhi. It's very difficult for them to give and receive admonishment, to give and receive mutual correction and assistance. So they tend to have an extraordinarily difficult time. So this is something which we need to watch out for, especially when relating with our fellow practitioners. So when relating with when relating with everyone, we should make an effort to not give in to anger. We should make an effort to be kind and considerate rather than callous and self-centered. Of course, that's true with everyone. But especially with our fellow spiritual practitioners, we need to be very careful not to poison the waters, so to speak. We need to be really careful that we don't damage our friendly relationships with our co-practitioners, because our co-practitioners are our lifeline. They're our support. So there's a very well-known sutta where Venerable Ananda says to the Buddha, it seems to me that having good spiritual companions is half of the spiritual life. And the Buddha says, no, that's not true. Having good spiritual companions is the entire holy life, the entire spiritual life. So the Buddha placed a great deal of importance on developing and maintaining good relationships with other spiritual practitioners so that we can support each other in the path towards awakening. So when we're constantly giving in to anger, when we're inconsiderate and harsh to our fellow practitioners, then they'll start to pull away from us. They'll distance themselves from us. They won't want to be around us. They won't want to practice with us. They won't want to discuss with us. So we lose our most valuable and important support, which is our fellow practitioners. So the Buddha continues, these are the 5 kinds of mental desolation that have not been abandoned by him. So we should reflect. How do we relate to these 5 kinds of mental desolation? Do we still have any of these? And if so, we should make an effort to abandon them, to let go of them, to move beyond them. So then the Buddha goes into the next list. He says, what are the 5 kinds of mental imprisonment that have not been destroyed by him? Here, monks, in regards to sensuality, a monk is not free of passion, interest, affection, thirst, fever, and craving. Monks, when a monk is not free of passion, interest, affection, thirst, fever, and craving about sensuality, his mind does not tend towards ardency, commitment, perseverance, and striving. As his mind does not tend towards ardency, commitment, perseverance, and striving, this is the first kind of mental imprisonment that has not been destroyed by him. So this is starting off with the issue of sensuality, which in Buddhism, obsession with sensuality is considered to be one of the basic obstacles to development in the practice. Because as long as we still think that happiness can be found in sensuality, in sensual experiences, then we won't be particularly committed to our spiritual practice. Spiritual practice is really difficult. It takes a really long time. Significant results take a while to come. Whereas sensuality is really easy and fast. You just go to the store and buy some cake and eat the cake, and you're like, wow, that was nice. Very quick, very easy, no problems. At least this is the attitude of somebody who still has this kind of mental imprisonment. This problem of thinking that happiness can be found in sensuality. Because actually, when we reflect on it, we realize that, yeah, sensual pleasures are pretty quick and easy, but they're temporary, they're unfulfilling, they're unsatisfying, and they leave us just as bad as before. They don't bring us any lasting benefit. In fact, all they do is leave us with an even deeper feeling of hollowness. They don't do us any real benefit. So, sensuality here, by the way, it refers to any kind of sensory experience that we get caught up with or obsessed with. So it doesn't just mean the most extreme forms of sensuality, such as attachment to sexual activity or obsession with food or obsession with drugs and or anything of that sort. Though, of course, those are included. But those are simply the most coarse or extreme examples of sensual obsession. Actually, obsession with any kind of sensory experience still qualifies as a form of sensuality. So even things that we consider refined, like maybe you're really into classical music. Well, bad news, that's still obsession with sensuality. That's still attachment to something which is impermanent, unsatisfying, and ultimately unreliable. And that obsession, that attachment, will prevent one from cultivating a mind which is free of limitations. It will prevent us from developing unconditional happiness. So even attachment to refined and subtle or seemingly less harmful forms of sensuality still prevent us from making substantial progress on the path. So in the next one, the next two are in the same format. So the Buddha says, monks, this is another one. In regards to the body, a monk is not free of passion, interest, affection, thirst, fever, and craving. And in regards to visible objects, a monk is not free of passion, interest, affection, thirst, fever, and craving. So this is carrying on with the same theme, but giving a couple particular examples of where we tend to get caught up in things. So first off, in bodies. So either in other people's bodies or in our own, we get way too obsessed. Actually, any obsession is too much, by the way. So we do try to keep our own body healthy. In fact, that's one of the elements of Buddhist practice is we do protect the health of our body. Because when we're healthy, it's easier to practice. When we're healthy, it's easier to develop sila, samadhi, and panya, so morality, concentration, and wisdom. But it's also recognizing that the body is just the body. It's just this bloody piece of meat that we carry around. So it's a useful tool that we use to interact with the world, but it's not something that we should get obsessed with because it's not who we are. It's just this piece of meat that we're interacting with for the time being. And similarly, regarding other people's bodies, it's easy for us to get really obsessed with other people's bodies, but their bodies are the same. Again, it's just this bloody piece of meat that we get overly obsessed with because of our misunderstanding of its true nature, because of our tendency to fixate on the limited form of pleasure that we can get from associating with bodies. And the third object here, so here it's translated as visible object. The Pali word is rupa, and rupa in Pali usually has two main meanings. So one is, again, body, so physical body. Another meaning of rupa is sight, so an object that you can see with your eyes. So since the Buddha had just said body in the previous paragraph, so kaya, which again means body, rupa here probably does not mean body because then he would just be repeating himself. But rather it's probably referring to visible forms, so sights, things that we see with our eyes. So both of these would also be included automatically under sensuality. So I suspect that the reason why the Buddha singles out both of them for extra attention is because these are two particular areas where we tend to get very strongly caught. So one is with bodies and with the physical sensations that come through body contact. That's one place where we get really caught up really easily. And the other is with sight, with what we see. Again, of our senses, the one that we usually rely on the most is sight. So touch and sight are two of the two of the senses which we tend to give the most importance to, which we rely upon the most strongly, and therefore where we tend to have the strongest attachment, the strongest passion, the strongest lust and obsession. So these are where we need to put forth an extra effort to really closely watch our mind, to really closely watch our attitudes. Next one, the Buddha says, monks, this is another one. There is a monk who eats as much as he wishes to fill his stomach, and dwells devoted to the pleasure of sleep, the pleasure of reclining, and the pleasure of lethargy. Monks, when a monk eats as much as he wishes to fill his stomach and dwells devoted to the pleasure of sleep, the pleasure of reclining, and the pleasure of lethargy, his mind does not tend towards ardency, commitment, perseverance, and striving. As his mind does not tend towards ardency, commitment, perseverance, and striving, this is the fourth kind of mental imprisonment that has not been destroyed by him. So this is the case of someone who likes eating and sleeping. So they try to do as much eating and sleeping as they possibly can. I see one person who identifies with this particular issue. And actually, this is a really common one. Just in terms of monastic life in particular, when we enter monastic life, there's not a lot of entertainment that's available to us. Very little, actually. But two things that you can get every day are food and sleep. Well, usually. Usually you can always get, well, most of the time, you can get food and sleep. Not always, but most of the time. So it's a relatively, seemingly reliable source of pleasure, seemingly reliable source of entertainment. And even more so as a layperson. As a layperson, you can eat pretty much as you want whenever you want, unless you're in poverty, unless you really don't have enough to get by. But most of us, we can eat pretty much as we want whenever we want. Sleeping as much as we want is a little bit harder because you might have work to go to. But actually, if you work 8 hours a day, add in a couple hours for commuting and eating and things, then actually you could sleep a good 12, 14 hours a day without too much trouble. I'm not recommending this, by the way. But it's recognizing that actually we can spend quite a lot of time just eating and sleeping, or thinking about what we're going to eat, or planning and preparing special foods. So there's a friend of mine who used to live at a particular temple. And she said that at this temple, you would wake up early in the morning and start preparing for breakfast, and then you'd have breakfast, and then you'd clean up from breakfast, and you'd immediately start preparing for lunch, and then you'd cook lunch, and you'd have lunch, and you'd clean up from lunch, and then you'd immediately start preparing for dinner, and you'd spend the afternoon preparing dinner, and then you'd have a nice leisurely dinner, and then you'd clean up from dinner, and then it would be pretty much time to go to bed. Then you would wake up the next day and do the same thing. So she was lamenting that at this particular temple, that actually they spent the majority of the day doing something related to food, which was a bit disappointing because she was kind of hoping to do meditation and study instead. But instead spent most of her time being in some way related to the kitchen, some way involved with the process of food. So recognizing then how, if we're not careful, we can waste tremendous amounts of time with eating, sleeping, thinking about eating and sleeping, obsessing about eating and sleeping, wondering and worrying about eating and sleeping, we can spend a tremendous amount of time wasted on these pursuits. And again, this is another way that we get caught up in the pursuit of conditional happiness rather than unconditional happiness. As long as we think that today's lunch is going to make us happy, then we'll tend to forget that true happiness is found through relinquishing all forms of desire. As long as we're sitting here wondering when our next nap time is going to come, then we won't be particularly focused on keeping our mind sharp, awake, and alert in this moment. In fact, we might start drifting off right in the middle of the meditation session. So watching out for this tendency to drift towards obsession with eating and sleeping, and to start to lose our sharp edge that we need in order to make steady progress in our practice. That said, this does not mean that you should starve yourself, because that's just a form of self-torture. And it does not mean that you should prevent yourself from getting enough sleep. Because if you don't get enough sleep, then once again, you'll just be drowsy and dozing off during your meditation practice, which also isn't particularly helpful. So it's about the right amount, not too much, not too little. So eat the right amount, sleep the right amount, but also don't obsess about it. These are just perfectly ordinary things. So eating and sleeping are nothing special. They're just things that we do in order to keep our body functioning properly. But they're nothing special. They're not worth obsessing about. Then the fifth example, the Buddha says, monks, this is another one. There is a monk who lives the holy life intent upon a particular group of devas, thinking, by means of this virtue, practice, austerity, or holy life, I will become a deva or a particular kind of deva. Monks, when a monk lives the holy life intent upon a particular group of devas, thinking, by means of this virtue, practice, austerity, or holy life, I will become a deva or a particular kind of deva, his mind does not tend towards ardency, commitment, perseverance, and striving. As his mind does not tend towards ardency, commitment, perseverance, and striving, this is the fifth kind of mental imprisonment that has not been destroyed by him. So this is one which is surprisingly common in the broader Buddhist world, which is there's a lot of people who think enlightenment is too difficult, awakening is too remote, it's too far away. But if I just live a good virtuous life, then I'll be reborn as a deva. I'll be reborn in one of the heavenly realms where life is a lot more pleasant than as a human. So I'll just focus on that. Much easier. Much easier. I don't need to worry about developing deep, penetrating insight into the subconscious mind. That's way too hard. I'll just follow the precepts, maybe do some love and kindness meditation once in a while, and I'll be reborn as a deva. Won't that be great? So if that's our goal, to be reborn as a deva, yeah, of course we're not going to put forth a lot of effort in our practice, because that actually doesn't take very much effort. All you have to do is be a relatively decent person, relatively good person, and you can be reborn as a deva. It's really not that challenging. It's also not remotely special. We've been a deva countless times. Countless times we've been a deva. And it did not produce any lasting benefit. And here we are again, back in these rotting human bodies with these unenlightened minds. And all that deva life did us absolutely zero good. I'm sure we had some nice parties, it was great, it was fun, and then it ended. The karma bank account ran dry. And we dropped out of the deva realms. And here we are, back in the human realm. Actually, we're lucky that we wound up back in the human realm and not in something worse, as we've also been in countless times. So it's also recognizing that the Deva worlds are the counterpart to uh, the realms of misery, the lower realms. So the human realm is right in the middle. It might not feel that way sometimes. It might feel like a lower realm, but actually the human realm is right in the middle. So above you have the Deva realms, very pleasant, happy places to be, kind of like a constant party. And then below that you have the lower realms, the realms of misery, the plains of despair, where life is pretty miserable pretty much all of the time. So it's like a pendulum, constantly swinging back and forth. Heaven realm, hell realm, heaven realm, hell realm, swinging back and forth. Right now we're in the human realm, right in the middle. Not too bad. So if we set our mind on the Deva realm, we swing back into the hell realm. Heaven realm, hell realm, heaven realm, hell realm. Kind of a waste of time, isn't it? Because this is what we've been doing for countless lifetimes. It's just bouncing back and forth between the heaven realms and the hell realms, the higher planes and the lower planes, the pleasant places and the unpleasant places, just constantly bouncing back and forth. And it's never done us any good. We haven't learned very much from this. And what we have learned, we've mostly forgotten. So it's not doing us any good to just keep bouncing in and out of the Deva realms. So instead, what we're trying to do is to cultivate disenchantment towards all states of being, even the Deva realms, even the heavenly worlds, and instead focusing on full enlightenment, focusing on developing the deep, incisive wisdom that clearly sees through all forms of existence as hollow, empty, insubstantial, impermanent, impersonal, not who we are, not worth pursuing, not worth clinging to. So these are the 5 kinds of mental imprisonment. And the Buddha says, monks, when there is a monk for whom these 5 kinds of mental desolation have not been abandoned, and these 5 kinds of mental imprisonment have not been destroyed, it is not possible for him to attain growth, development, and fulfillment in this Dhamma Vinaya. But then the Buddha gives the positive side of this. He says, monks, when there is a monk for whom 5 kinds of mental desolation have been abandoned, and 5 kinds of mental imprisonment have been well destroyed, it is possible for him to attain growth, development, and fulfillment in this Dhamma Vinaya. What are the 5 kinds of mental desolation that have been abandoned by him? And he gives the usual things. So here, a monk is not uncertain or doubtful about the teacher, the Dhamma, the Sangha, and the training. He has resolved his mind and become confident in them. When a monk is not uncertain or doubtful about the training and has resolved his mind and become confident in them, his mind tends towards ardency, commitment, perseverance, and striving. Then the 5th one, the Buddha says, there is a monk who is not angry or dissatisfied with his co-practitioners, who does not have an afflicted mind or a callous nature. So that's the 5 kinds of mental desolation when they have been abandoned. Then he says, what are the 5 kinds of mental imprisonment that have been well destroyed? So in regards to sensuality, to the body, and to visible objects, a monk is free of passion, interest, affection, thirst, fever, and craving. Then the 4th example, a monk who does not eat as much as he wishes to fill his stomach and does not dwell devoted to the pleasure of sleep, reclining, and lethargy. And finally, a monk who does not live the holy life intent upon rebirth as a deva. So those are the 5 kinds of mental imprisonment that have been well destroyed. And the Buddha repeats again, monks, when there is a monk for whom these 5 kinds of mental desolation have been abandoned, and these 5 kinds of mental imprisonment have been well destroyed, it is possible for him to attain growth, development, and fulfillment in this Dhamma Vinaya. Then the Buddha moves into a slightly different direction here. He says, he develops the basis of success. That's iddhipada in Pali, for those who are familiar with this term, iddhipada. He develops the basis of success, which is endowed with the formation of concentration and striving based on interest. The basis of success, which is endowed with the formation of concentration and striving based on energy, based on mentality, and based on investigation, with exertion as the fifth. So the first four here are, again, the four iddhipadas, which are translated here as the four bases of success. So iddhi has two main meanings. One is success, and the other is spiritual power. And then pada has the meaning either of a basis or a path or a track system. So here it's translated as basis of success, but elsewhere you might see it as the path to spiritual power or other such translations. But the basic meaning here, again, iddhipada is basis of success. And the four iddhipadas are chanda, which is an interest in something, in this case, an interest in one's spiritual practice. Virya, which is energy, so putting forth this heroic effort. So virya is from the same root as the word vira, which means hero. So virya is like heroic effort. So really putting yourself into it, putting a lot of energy and effort into what you're doing. The third one is chitta, which it's translated here as mentality. So there's a few ways of relating to this. One is that it's thinking or considering what one is doing, planning one's practice, really putting some thought into what spiritual practice is and how we can practice it properly, how we can apply it properly. Another completely different understanding of the word chitta here. There's a few places in the suttas where the Buddha uses the word chitta to refer specifically to the mind in samadhi. So where chitta is used to refer to the mind in jhana, the mind which is in deep concentration. So I'm not convinced that that's what it means in this particular case, but that is an interpretation that some scholars bring forward. And the fourth one is investigation, vimamsa, which is sometimes translated as review. So vimamsa means to investigate one's practice, to investigate the results of one's practice, to review what is one doing, how is it going, how might one do better in the future. So it's this process of reviewing and considering. So this is sometimes seen as a sequence. So one starts with producing interest in practicing. One puts forth energy, so one makes a sincere, resolute effort to practice. Then one thinks about and considers what one is doing, and one reviews. How is it going? What results are coming? Am I getting good results or bad results? What might I do differently? And then the fifth one that the Buddha gives, exertion. So this is not traditionally in the list of the four iddhipadas. So the Buddha is kind of tacking it on as an extra factor. So exertion, putting forth, again, not just a little bit of effort, but really committing ourselves thoroughly to our spiritual practice. So it's not enough to just kind of like nap our way to nibbana. We actually do have to put forth some effort to train the mind, to purify the mind. Then the Buddha says, monks, a monk who is endowed in this way with 15 factors, including exertion. So 15 factors. So that means one has abandoned the 5 kinds of mental desolation, removed, so abandoned the 5 kinds of mental desolation, removed the 5 kinds of mental imprisonment, developed the 4 iddhipadas, the 4 bases of success, and is practicing exertion. So it's a total of 15. A monk who is endowed in this way with 15 factors, including exertion, it is possible for him to attain breakthrough. So that means stream entry. It is possible for him to attain breakthrough. It is possible for him to attain awakening. It is possible for him to attain arrival at unsurpassable security from bondage. So yoga kema. So kema means security or safety. So yoga kema means safety from yoga, security from yoga, which yoga in this case does not mean Hindu stretching exercises. In this case, yoga means being bound or tied to something. So it's yoga in the sense of connection, but not in a positive way. Here it's used in a negative way of being bound, being trapped. So yoga kema means like being free from entrapment, being free of bondage. And unsurpassable security from bondage, anuttara yoga kema, is a synonym for full enlightenment. And then the Buddha gives a simile. He says, monks, it is like when there is a hen who has 8 or 10 or 12 eggs. She correctly sits on, incubates, and fully develops those eggs. Even if the hen does not produce the wish, may the chicks pierce the eggshells with their claws or beaks and break through safely, it is still possible that those chicks will pierce the eggshells with their claws and beaks and break through safely. Monks, in the same way, a monk who is endowed with these 15 factors, including exertion, it is possible for him to attain breakthrough. It is possible for him to attain awakening. It is possible for him to attain arrival at unsurpassable security from bondage. This is what the Blessed One said. Satisfied, those monks delighted in the Blessed One's speech. In other words, what he's pointing to is that this is a natural progression. If we sincerely commit ourselves to spiritual practice, if we sincerely commit ourselves to living in line with the Dhamma, then results come all on their own. The results come in their own time when they're ready. So the simile he gives here, so the hen sitting on her eggs, as long as the hen sits on the eggs correctly and for a long enough period of time, then the eggs will hatch. So the hen doesn't need to think that she wants the eggs to hatch. She just needs to do the practice and the eggs will hatch. So in the same way, as long as we do the practice, our wisdom will grow. And eventually we can break through the shell of ignorance and see reality as it is. So that's the end of this sutta. Do we have any questions?
Thank you, Bante.
Yeah.
And hello, Jen, Cam, Dhammalark, Melinda, Internet, Sandra, and Melvin, who also says, thank you, Bante and Aya, for these precious teachings and for giving me a good excuse to get out of bed, sit upright, and pay attention every morning. And thank you both for making me smile. Oh.
Well, I'm happy that all of you are joining us day after day. It's really wonderful.
Sadhu. And Dhammalark has a question. He says, hi, Bante. I am dissatisfied with some of my co-practitioners.
You're not the only one.
It feels quite mucky in the mind when trying to address it. It feels like I could be opening myself to abuse if I would return to train. Any suggestions?
Yeah, a few things. First off, think of any good qualities that your co-practitioners have. Often what happens when we're dissatisfied with our co-practitioners is because we're fixating on their negative qualities and we're ignoring their positive qualities. Keep in mind that anybody who's not fully enlightened has some negative qualities. That's inescapable. So if we are always looking for bad qualities, then we will definitely find some. Because even the best of ordinary people has some flaws. Otherwise, they would be enlightened by now. So if you look for flaws, you will find them. But if you look for positive qualities, you might find that there's a lot to see there as well. So look for positive qualities and reflect in your own mind on those positive qualities, and also compliment and praise them. So maybe you have one of your fellow practitioners who's very grumpy and irritable and hard to get along with and always takes the last brownie or whatever it is. But then you're like, oh, but actually, they're pretty good with the suttas. She's read a lot of the suttas and can talk about them well and can discuss the meaning of them in some detail. Okay, so then you go and you praise her. It's like, oh, I really appreciate how much effort you've put into learning the suttas. I really like the perspectives that you bring forward on the suttas. It's really, really praiseworthy. I appreciate it a lot. Or at the very least, reflect in your mind that good quality. So look for good qualities in your co-practitioners because you'll usually find them. On the other hand, if the group of people that you've been practicing with actually is abusive towards you, then it's probably not worth going back to that particular group of people. So we do also need to be realistic. We do need to be forgiving because once again, most of us, including me, most of us are unenlightened, which means that we make mistakes sometimes. So we need to be forgiving of each other, forgiving of each other's shortcomings, because we have them. And every now and then we're going to display our defilements. So forgive each other, but also be realistic. If the situation feels abusive, if it feels too much, if it feels like it's more than you can handle, if it feels like it's actually counterproductive to your practice, then maybe look for a different group of practitioners to spend time with. Okay?
Thank you, Bhante. And Catalina says, these morning teachings are getting me now back to our daily practices at the monastery. Thank you. Aw,
Great.
We missed you, Catalina.
Yes, I hope you come back soon. Well, after things have cleared up a bit.
Yeah. And hello, gents. He says thank you. And Kevin, hello as well. He is reminding us all to practice dana, sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Great, thank you.
And Kam asks, Bhante, would not greed, hatred, and delusion be considered as mental imprisonment?
Yeah, actually, all of these things that the Buddha is mentioning are different shades or varieties of greed, hatred, and delusion. So he's just giving some particular examples of how greed, hatred, and delusion can manifest in our practice. So it's something that I find quite helpful because one of the things which can happen in Buddhist practice is that we have these very broad general categories like greed, hatred, and delusion. And we use them so often that they just start to become meaningless. We're just like, oh yeah, greed, hatred, and delusion, bad, try not to have them. But we don't actually really reflect on what that means. But then when the Buddha gives these lovely descriptions, like there is a monk who is angry and dissatisfied with his co-practitioners, who has an afflicted mind and a callous nature, then we're like, oh, that's me. The Buddha's talking about me. How cute. And then we're like, oh, wait, he's saying this is a bad thing. oh, oops. So he's just talking about hatred. He's talking about the defilement of hatred. But he's talking about it in a somewhat more flowery or evocative way, which can make it easier for us to connect to. Or like when he goes on about the one who eats as much as they wish to and then is committed to the pleasure of lying down. It's like, oh yeah, oh, I do that sometimes. Oopsie. Well, that's just greed. But he's describing a particular variety of greed in a way that we can relate to because we can see ourselves in it a bit more easily. Or the thing about wanting to be reborn in a group of devas. So it's based upon the delusion that there's any value whatsoever to being reborn as a deva. So it's a particular kind of delusion. And actually, it's not just delusion, it's also greed mixed together. But again, it's something which we can relate to. I know a lot of Buddhist practitioners, myself included, who every now and then have the thought of, oh, this practice is really hard, but at least I can be a deva. It's kind of that like lazy fallback option that we sometimes get into when attaining enlightenment seems a little too remote. So that's part of what I see the Buddha doing here. Rather than just saying, greed, hatred, and delusion are bad, let go of them. And he does that in a million other suttas. But here he's giving some more specific examples which can help us relate to what it means to let go of greed, hatred, and delusion. Okay.
Sadhu. All right, I think that was it. Cam says, that's very clear, Bhante. Thank you for clarifying.
Okay.
And unless few other questions appear.
Okay. Anything else that people want to ask about?
Also, the
residents.
I noticed I have read on food. What should I do?
Well, that's not surprising. Reflect on the temporary and unsatisfying nature of food. It only lasts a short time, and it's not actually the most wonderful thing in the whole world. And it's okay sometimes.
For example, I feel really happy when I eat some like nice food.
Yeah, that's normal.
Is that bad?
No, that's to be expected. So that's the gratification in food. So the Buddha said we should notice three things: the gratification, the drawback, and the escape. So recognizing that eating some food, is certain kinds of food anyway, is pleasant, that's knowing the gratification. It's knowing that there is something pleasant there. But the drawback is recognizing that the experience is temporary. It doesn't last very long. It's not that great. It's pretty good, but it's not amazingly wonderful. Well, sometimes it is. But generally speaking, it's not amazingly wonderful. And also recognizing that the desire and craving for food creates disturbance in the mind. It creates discomfort and agitation in the mind. It makes it difficult for us to develop samadhi. It makes it hard for us to meditate. It makes it hard for us to keep the mind peaceful as we go throughout our day. And sometimes we're really looking forward to lunchtime, and then we go to lunch and we look at the serving table and we're like, oh, really? That's it? Or something looks really good, but then you start eating it and you're like, oh, they put too much salt in this. What were they thinking? Or the flip side, oh, there's not enough salt. What were they thinking? Or whatever it is. Like we can find something to be dissatisfied by, whether we want to or not. And then either way, the experience comes to an end very quickly. Within a few minutes, it's over. And if we ate too much, or if we ate things that aren't good for us, then we feel sick. There's a pervasive feeling of discomfort or unease in the body if we don't eat the right way. And then commonly after eating, our mind gets dull and hazy for a while. So then it's difficult to protect our mind because it's not clear. It's not precise anymore for a little while. So reflecting on the drawbacks then helps us to produce the mind of disenchantment, the mind of serenity, the mind of non-obsession, the mind of dispassion, of detachment, of non-attachment. So this willingness to be happy no matter what happens. So when you get what you want, you're happy. When you don't get what you want, you're still happy. So that's the escape. The escape is learning how to make our happiness not rely upon getting what we want. Does that make sense? Okay. Any other questions? Yeah.
I think I can answer this myself, but I don't want to rely on my undiluted mind. In practicing and developing this passion, a lot of times or some of the time, I miss the mark and go over into aversion or disgust for humanity, of course, which I'm still a part of, and I've scaled that down a whole lot. But I mean, just as mindfulness gets stronger over time, I mean, being able to dial that in before and sort of cut it before I get to that point. But is there any other more specific suggestions besides like mental practice or to help not fall over the edge into that, so to speak?
Yeah, well, I mean, actually, the first most important thing is just to closely watch the mind and to notice when the mind starts to drift towards aversion and to notice the unpleasantness of it. So aversion has a certain sickly sweetness to it, but fundamentally it's painful. It's unpleasant. It's not particularly nice. It's kind of like rotten donuts. Like there's a sweetness there, but you're kind of like, ugh. It's really not something that you want to be doing. But we do it anyway because there is that sickly sweetness there. But as you pay attention to the unpleasantness of the aversion, then you'll become less and less likely to go there again. And you'll withdraw from it more and more quickly each time. So cultivating metta helps to vaccinate the mind so that we're less likely to drift towards aversion. But ultimately, it's recognizing the inherently futile and self-destructive nature of aversion that keeps us away from it in the first place. Okay? And forgive your fellow humans. They're all pretty confused and unhappy. Unhappy because they're confused. Yeah. You have a question?
I don't get enough sleep. I'm really grumpy. And I'm always worried. I get enough sleep. And I'm always worried about my sleep.
Okay. Well, then make sure you get enough sleep.
I do.
But don't worry about it. Just get enough sleep. And if you don't get enough sleep, then do your best. Because that's also how we grow, is when we're in challenging circumstances, and rather than giving up, we do our best. And we know that sometimes we're going to screw up, but we still keep trying. And that's how we grow. That's how we get better. But yeah, it's true. If we're low on sleep, then it's harder to control our minds. But sometimes that's just the situation you're in. Maybe you couldn't sleep last night because you were up worrying about the global disaster for a while. A lot of people have been struggling with sleeplessness these days. That's not surprising. So maybe you find, I haven't been getting enough sleep lately and it's been hard to control my mind. Well, try anyway. And you might find that actually, if you try, you can control your mind. It's just harder, but you can. But also be forgiving with yourself because you're trying to do something that's difficult to do, which means you're going to make mistakes. And that's okay. We all make mistakes sometimes, not just you. We all make mistakes sometimes. So we make mistakes and we forgive ourselves. We apologize if we hurt somebody else or upset someone. We apologize. And we try to do better next time. And you just keep moving forward like this. Okay. Anything else?
Yes, Dhammalak is asking how to be strong enough to withstand Asubha practice.
Maybe you're not ready for Asubha practice, and that's okay. So Asubha practice is not for everyone, and it's not for all times. It's actually meant for dealing with particular kinds of excessive greed. And it has to be done very carefully, because if asubha practice is done without proper wisdom, we can just wind up feeding our aversion. We can just wind up fueling disgust, which is not disenchantment. Disenchantment is a peaceful, joyful state of mind. The joy of not needing anything. That's disenchantment. Whereas the mind of disgust is a mind of aversion, a mind of irritation, a mind of hating. So that's not wholesome. So we have to be very careful with asubha practice. So you only use it when your mind is overcome with extreme desire, extreme greed, and other methods are not helping. And when you use asubha practice, you use it very carefully and make sure that you're not overshooting the mark and cultivating disgust rather than disenchantment. So maybe it's just not right for you to do asubha practice at this time. That's a practice which it really needs to be done in consultation with a teacher, because people go wrong with it so often. This is something I've seen a lot in monastic life, because in monastic life, we're dealing with different kinds of desire and greed, and trying to learn how to control it. And often monastics start using asubha practice in very self-destructive ways. So then that's where the teacher will say, like, no, this is not the right way. It's not the way to be practicing. This isn't doing you any good. It's causing harm. So if you're going to do asubha practice, make sure that you're in contact with a teacher who can help rein you back from that kind of error. But also closely watch your own mind and ask yourself, is there another way that I can train the mind? Another way that I can help move the mind towards that state of contentment, that state of non-attachment, that state of cool, peaceful equanimity. Okay?
Right. Thank you so much, Bhante. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. All right. Thank you all for joining us this morning. So we will be meeting 2 more times today, one at 1:30 p.m. and another one at 7:30 p.m. Every morning, we will be having a session at 8 a.m., which will normally be Sutta study, including on Monday and Tuesday. I haven't posted it. It's my duty. I haven't posted it yet, but I will take care of doing that this afternoon. And actually, the suttas that we will be studying on Monday and Tuesday will be the Anapanasati Sutta. It's been a special request. Bhante doesn't know yet. And then in the evening, every evening we meet at 7:30 p.m. for guided meditation, and then Dharma talk and Dharma discussion afterwards, as usual. So that also will be happening on Monday evening and Tuesday evening. If you have some particular topics that you would like for the monastics to discuss, to talk about on Monday and Tuesday, but also the next couple of weeks, since it seems like we will be practicing social distancing for a while, you can send your ideas or requests on info@buddhistinsights.com. Thomas just showed up and said thank you. Hi, Thomas. Long time no see.
Hey, Thomas.
And yeah, so thanks so much, and hope to see you all soon. Have a great rest of the day.
What is